Good afternoon. My name is Harald Treppenbrein. I'm the head of the media unit at EAKR, which implements the Creative Europe media program. The session this afternoon is dedicated to the changes in the development support of the media program. The program itself intervenes all along the value chain. It has a significant increase with this programming period up to 27. We will spend 1.4 billion in support of the audiovisual industry, as an increase of more than 50% in relation to the prior program. And as I said, it's along distribution, development, production, training, markets, all along. But indeed, an important part goes to the production sector, most prominently in support of the development of projects. Jolene Williams, head of sector, will walk you through the main changes, and there will be a Q&A afterwards. For this, they will be sent back to the main room to be able to answer to your questions, if you have some. You will be also streamed live and be visible. But that's enough for my introduction. Over to Jolene and the development support of Creative Europe Media.
Thank you, Harald, and welcome to this session. I'm happy to join you, albeit virtually. So as Harald introduced, we will be talking a bit about the changes in the development support in the new media program. Just want to give you a bit of an overview, as you could see on the previous slide. So the media program provides support both in the area of audience, business, and in the cluster that we call the content cluster. And this content cluster actually overarches two big parts in content creation. On the one hand, we have several actions dealing with development support. So if you are a bit familiar with the media program, you will recognize the European Slate development support that exists since a few years. But we have some novelties in this new program. So we have now an action that is really opening up the Slate development support to a specific subset of countries where we can see, let's say, a lower production capacity. So this is the European mini Slate development action. A brand new action is European co-development, and I will go into the details of this action during this presentation. You might also know from the past that we were also supporting the development of video games. This action still exists, but we have extended it. We saw in the previous selection that more and more we were getting applications for immersive projects. So we have created a larger budget base for such kind of projects by combining the video games development support and support to immersive content development. The content cluster also includes the support to TV and online content production. This will be out of the scope of the current presentation. I will also not go into the details of video games and immersive content, but obviously afterwards I'm certainly willing to answer questions on it. So for us today, the focus will be on presenting the changes to the support scheme that is probably the best well known from the past, which is the European Slate development. What is new in the context of this scheme, but also introduce the European mini Slate development scheme, and then focus on the new action called European co-development. All the actions in the content cluster contribute to the objectives of the Creative Europe media strand, obviously, and the highlights for us are really to encourage collaboration and innovation in the creation and production of European audiovisual works. We really want to focus on projects with a strong European added value. So we really want to encourage cross-border cooperation amongst producers and content developers, and also stimulate innovation in terms of content. We want to support cooperation, clearly, but also like not necessarily the more traditional corporations. They are obviously welcome, but we also want to push a bit forward cooperation between actors from different territory sizes, from different linguistic areas, so as to be enabled to foster a level playing field, making sure that we can support talent wherever it comes from, but also ensure that we can preserve and stimulate the very broad cultural diversity that we see in Europe. Again, the overview of the different actions in this content cluster. And why am I showing this again? Because I think that in the different actions that we are supporting in terms of content development, there are very similar, let's say, objectives, or we have a very broad wish list, which is very similar in all the actions, but obviously with some different accents. So one of the main aims of our activities is to increase the capacity of producers to develop projects with broad potential to circulate. We want to foster the competitiveness of European independent production companies and support them by increasing their economic weight on the market, so making them stronger, making them more competitive compared not only to the American and let's say the Asian market, but also internally. We want to support cooperation among production companies between based in the different media countries. Certainly want to support high quality European works, and we want to strengthen as well the independence, and very specifically for the TV and online content action, the independence of producers vis-à-vis broadcasters and digital platforms. So some keywords for us: originality, innovation, commercial ambition. These are really cornerstones of the media program, and more specifically this support to content development and production. Important to highlight in the context of this new media program is that there are two new cross-cutting priorities. So you will see them in the majority of our new actions. So on the one hand, we want to support a more sustainable and environmentally respectful industry. So in the different calls, you will see that not only is there an award criterion for productions that, or we are evaluating, let's say, productions that are presenting measures for greening, but we also want to focus very much on gender balance, inclusion, diversity, and representativeness. So in the majority of the media actions, if not all, you will see these two new cross-cutting priorities. And I think this is, let's say, a big novelty in this program, and something that you need to be aware of, because any application submitted to us will be evaluated against these aspects. Two important notions when I introduce the actions for development, which I would like to tackle at the start, because they are important for the different actions that I will be presenting. First of all, what do we consider to be a European audiovisual production company? So European means for us in the terminology or in the context of our calls, that a company is established in one of the countries that is fully participating in the media program, and the company must be owned directly or indirectly, either wholly or by majority participation by nationals from such media countries. In case a company is publicly listed, the location of the stock exchange will determine the nationality or the European nature of the company. An important concept in our cause is also that we are supporting independent production companies. What is independence in our context? So there can be no majority control by an audiovisual media service provider, either in shareholding or in commercial terms. More concretely, it means that not more than 25% of the share capital can be held by any audiovisual media service provider, or 50% if more than one audiovisual media service provider, so either a broadcaster or a non-linear broadcaster, is involved in the shareholding. That in terms of introduction. Then let's look a bit at our actions for slate development, so European slate and mini slate development. The focus of these actions is really on increasing the development capacity of European independent production companies. So we want to give them a safe and flexible basis to work on several projects, on the development of several projects in parallel, following the rhythm of each project. We want to encourage companies to invest in talent by, amongst others, giving them the possibility to include a short film to be directed by an emerging talent to their slate. But also we want to support companies to invest in creativity. So the ultimate aim of this support, slate and mini slate, is to allow producers to scale up, diversify their activities, innovate, explore new fields and markets, and solidify their position in the market. In terms of the main changes of these two actions, so first of all, well, slate, we used to know from the previous media program. We have now established a sister action next to that with the mini slate development. And there, this is really a scheme that is focused, that is limited to countries with low audiovisual capacity. And I will present a list of the eligible countries a bit later. Also important to highlight in terms of change is that the funding mechanism that we are using has changed considerably. So in the past, applicants had to present us detailed budgets, and the EU grants, so our financial contribution to a selected project, represented a certain percentage, 50%, of the total eligible costs, and there were some ceilings in terms of amounts applicable. We have abandoned this way of funding, and we have chosen now for a more simplified form of funding. So there are fixed amounts per project, depending on the type of project. So it's really a very easy way of funding development activities, which is really cutting red tape, because in the end, the reporting will be much easier, but I will get back to that. The remainder of the changes compared to the past are, let's say, slighter. So we have removed the minimum legal existence of 36 months for companies. So in the past, companies had to exist already for minimum 3 years before they were eligible to apply. This no longer exists. Nevertheless, we continue to look for companies with, let's say, a solid experience in the development of audiovisual works. So we do have some requirements in terms of previous experience. This is a snapshot of what are the differences between slate and mini slate, and immediately also the reason why I am presenting the two actions together, because the differences are actually very limited. The main difference being the access to the activity or to the action. So for slate, it is open to applicants coming from all media countries. The access for mini slate is limited to a specific subset of countries, which will be presented in one of the following slides. Also important to keep in mind in the context of this financing is that in slate, an applicant is applying for a package of 3 to 5 works that will be developed, whilst for mini slate, let's say that the requirements are less stringent. There, a mini slate will have to consist of minimum 2 and maximum 3 works. In both of the actions, there is the possibility to add a short film to be directed by an emerging talent to the slate or mini slate. The third biggest difference is then the requirements in terms of previous experience. So on the side of the slate, we ask 2 previous works, and for mini slate, we ask 1 previous work. But again, I will go a bit more in detail later on. The budgets are vastly different. So we have 18 million available for this year's call for slate applications, whilst for mini slate, there is still a considerable budget of 5 million euro. The reasons for, let's say, the discrepancies in the budget is, first of all, that in a slate application, there are more works involved, so minimum 3, maximum 5, but we see that a lot of the applications are going either for 4 or 5 projects in the slate, but also, let's say, the countries or the number of countries that are open, that have access to the slate call are obviously higher than those that have access to the mini slate call. In terms of deadlines, there will be a first deadline for slate on the 27th of April. The deadline for mini slate applications will follow after the summer break. So, and everything else, all other criteria, eligibility criteria, award criteria that apply to this call are exactly the same between slate and mini slate. Hence, the presentation together of these two actions. So everything that comes as from now applies in the same manner to slate and mini slate, except if I highlight a small difference. So in terms of eligible participants who can apply for these actions, I already highlighted the definition of independent European audiovisual production companies. So those are the eligible participants who have some experience in producing internationally distributed works. Important to keep in mind is that this is an application to be submitted by a single company. So this is a mono-beneficiary action. In case, let's say, the development, you need to rely on a mother or a sister company in terms of the development of the project. This affiliated entity can be included in the application, but at its heart, this is an application, a mono-beneficiary application, so an application to be submitted by one single production company. Also important to keep in mind is that in terms of the development support, as an applicant, you can only make one application per year. So either for slate or for mini slate development, if you are eligible, or as an applicant for a project in video games and immersive content, or as a coordinator for a co-development application. So if you are deciding for which of these actions to apply, keep that in mind. If you submit 2 applications, one or the other will have to be withdrawn. For those that potentially already applied to our call of last year, keep in mind that in case you were selected, obviously very good news for you, but you will not be able to reapply for the call of this year. This is a snapshot of the list of eligible countries. So keeping in mind that for the SLATE development support, all of the countries on screen are eligible, so the 27 EU member states, plus the 7 associated countries. So all of these together, we refer to as being the media countries. So all of these countries are fully participating in the media program and are eligible to submit applications for SLATE funding. For mini SLATE funding, it's only the countries that are in red and in greenish, bluish. I don't know how it comes across on your screen. So the countries that are considered LCC Group A and LCC Group B countries in our jargon. So low capacity countries Group A, low capacity countries Group B. I already referred to the fact that for our support, we are targeting companies with a certain experience. So the applicants have to demonstrate a recent experience in producing internationally distributed works. In mini SLATE, we are asking for 1 previous work. In SLATE, we are asking for 2 previous works. And what are now the conditions that apply to these? So these are works that must have been produced since 2014 that respects following criteria. So they have to be either an animation, fiction, or documentary project, either a one-off or a series of minimum 24 minutes. So quite easy criterion. Either an animation, fiction, documentary, minimum duration is 24 minutes. In case of nonlinear works such as VR, there is no minimum duration. We know that VR projects of 20 minutes are already quite, let's say, quite heavy. Yeah? This previous experience must have been released in cinema, broadcast on television, or made available on digital platforms in at least 3 countries other than their own. So there must have been an actual streaming or an actual release in cinema or an actual broadcast on television in 3 countries other than the country of the applicant, and this before the deadline for submission. So you will need to be able to prove to us that the previous work that you are bringing to fulfill the eligibility criteria has indeed been broadcast or streamed in 3 countries other than your own. And all of these releases must have been of a commercial nature, so they must have generated incomes. Also very important aspect, so screenings during festivals are not accepted for fulfilling this eligibility criterion. In terms of the kinds of works that you can choose, you must take care that the applicant company, so the production company, is either the sole production company on the previous work. In case of co-production, it must have been the major producer in the financing plan or the delegate producer. And in case, I mean, if the previous work does not fulfill either of these conditions, you can also come with a previous work on which either the CEO or one of the shareholders of your company has a personal on-screen credit, but only credits as producer and delegate producer are allowed. These were the conditions that related to the prior experience. So which applicants are eligible to apply? European independent audiovisual production companies that can demonstrate recent experience. Now we are shifting to what types of activities are eligible in the context of slate and mini slate development support. So for slate, your application must consist of minimum 3 and maximum 5 eligible works, and in case of mini slate, minimum 2 and maximum 3 eligible works. The types of work that you can submit to us for funding are animation projects, creative documentaries, or fiction projects, and all of them must be for commercial exploitation. There are some minimum requirements in terms of length of the work. You can see them on screen. I'm not going to go through them one by one. I think that speaks for itself. In case you would want to apply with a series, keep in mind that you cannot have several episodes of the same series in one application. So a series with a joint distribution and marketing strategy has to be submitted as a series, so will only count for one work. Also, a very important criterion in the context of our calls is that the first day of principal photography must be scheduled at least 10 months after the deadline for submission. Why is this so? This is oftentimes a bit questioned. Well, in the end, we are supporting development, so we want to make sure that you are still in the development phase. Our selection processes do take quite some time. So let's say that normally within 6 months you will have the results of our selections, but then afterwards we also still have to process your contract and issue your contract. And one of the golden rules, one of the fixed rules in the financial regulation is that we cannot fund activities that are already over. So we really want to make sure that by the time that we sign your contract, your development phase is still ongoing. You are still implementing activities in the context of the grant or the application that you submitted. So really important, this 10 months period between the deadline and entry into production, the first day of principal photography. Slate and mini slate support also wants to give established production companies the possibility to support emerging talent. And we do this through this possibility, an optional possibility, to also request support for the development and production of a short film. So a short will be an animation documentary or fiction project, again, of maximum 20 minutes. What is important is that when you submit an application and you want to include or you want to request an EU grant for development and production of the short film, that you verify very carefully that the director of this short film really falls within the definition that we use of emerging talent. So what we are targeting are directors with some experience, some professional experience, but who have not directed yet a project that would be eligible for the slate funding support, so for the main support that we just saw. So it can, I mean, traditionally it can be, let's say, a director that until now already has directed some short films, but who has not made, for example, a fiction project targeted at cinema of a duration of 60 minutes, for example. As with the short film support, we are both targeting development and production. In this case, the first day of principal photography of the short film can take place after the deadline. So we do not have this 10-month period between the deadline and the entry into production, but the first day of principal photography for the short could take place very shortly after the deadline for submission. Also important to know is that in case we would consider the short film to be ineligible, for example, we discover that the director already directed a film that is eligible for slate funding support. We do not want to exclude you completely of the selection, so we still want to give your the projects that you submit for slate funding a possibility or a chance, let's say. So in case the short film would be ineligible, we will still evaluate the application. So the application in itself remains eligible. We will just cut, let's say, the short film out of your application. I'm reaching more or less the end of the eligibility criteria, but I think this is more or less a self-evident criterion. Obviously, when you submit an application to us, you must have the rights, the majority of the rights to the project that you intend to develop. In case of adaptation, you also must secure the rights to the adaptation. And this must be proven through a signed contract with the authors. In case of a European co-production, so in case the project that you submit to us is a European co-production, an equal sharing of rights is allowed. And European co-production, you need to refer to our definition of Europeans. So if the other production company is a European audiovisual production company, according to our definition. There is a list of non-eligible types of projects. I'm not going to go through them one by one, maybe highlighting documentaries promoting tourism, animal reportage, talk shows. I think the most of these elements make sense considering the nature of the projects that we are targeting. In terms of the financing, so at the start, I explained that we are going for a simplified form of financing, meaning that there are fixed lump sums that apply depending on the genre and type of the project, and for fiction also the size of the project. So if you apply with an animation series, for example, you know that the lump sum for which you can apply is 60,000 euros. If part of your slate is a documentary project, a one-off documentary, the EU grant that you can request is 30,000 euros. And so on. You can read the table, obviously. For the short film, there is a lump sum of 10,000 euros. Now, what is the specificity of these fixed lump sums? So these are fixed sums. You cannot ask for more. You cannot ask for less. But most importantly, in terms of the reporting, so in case your project is selected, we will prepare your grant agreement with you. In this grant agreement, we will determine the deliverables. So you will, together with us, determine what we expect at the end of your contract to see as proof that you have been working on the development of this project. At the end of your contract, you basically will have to show that you have these deliverables, that you have indeed done the work that you set out to do. And as soon as you have provided us this proof, you will get this fixed lump sum amount. So there is no financial reporting. Apologies. There is no financial reporting at the end of your grant agreement, at the end of the action. You will just need to prove us certain deliverables, which we agreed upon in your contract. And from the moment that we have these deliverables, you will get this fixed lump sum. So no financial reporting anymore. at the end of the funding period. Apologies, I just take a sip of water. So that was for slate and mini slate funding. I will move over to European co-development. So European co-development is really a new action. You might remember from the past that we were supporting the development of single projects. This is not part of the current program anymore. So you should see European co-development as a kind of evolution from the single project support. The idea behind this is that media really wants to focus on transnational cooperation and focus on areas where support from national programs is more limited. We also know that European collaboration allows projects to scale up and to reach audiences across borders. So we wanted to invest in this and really support cooperation among European production companies and support them at a very early stage, so already at the development stage. The idea behind co-development is that the application will be submitted by at least 2 European independent production companies together. These companies are expected to have signed a co-development agreement specifying how they will divide the work and collaborate on the creative aspects. So this is really not the traditional co-production, it's really co-development, so working together on the creative aspects, on the creative development of the projects. As I said, an application to be submitted by minimum 2 independent European audiovisual production companies. It can be more. It can be a consortium of 3 producers, for example, that agree to work together on this one project that's that they believe in and that they want to work together on. So the application will be submitted by a consortium. There will always be one company that will take the lead, that will be considered the coordinator of this consortium. And hence we need at least 1 eligible partner. So the 2 entities, both the coordinator and the eligible partner, must have their legal seat in 2 different media countries. So the idea is really cross-border creative cooperation. And it's not the idea to work together between mother and sister companies. So it's really 2 production companies that are independent from each other. The coordinator will be required to demonstrate, again, recent experience in producing internationally distributed works. The conditions are the same as those applying for slate and mini slate, so that's an easy shortcut. The idea here is to support the co-development of a single project. So it's not slate development support. It's 2 companies, minimum 2 companies, working together on the development of one single project. In terms of eligible types of projects, again, the same criteria apply as for slate and mini slate. And also here, the first day of principal photography cannot be earlier than 10 months after the deadline. Interesting in this co-development call is that either the coordinator or the partner can have the majority of the rights to the project. So it may well be that one company, one experienced company, brings the previous experience necessary for the application to become eligible, but that the partner holds the majority of the rights to the project that they will together be developing. An equal sharing of rights is obviously also possible. The list of ineligible projects is the same as for slate and mini slate. So I'm not going to go into much detail there. I'm also very aware of the time. Probably I'm already talking too long. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on the financing principle. So for slate and mini slate, we had fixed lump sums. So where there was a fixed amount per type of project, depending on the genre and the size of the project. Here in co-development, we are working with customized lump sum, also a simplified version of a form of funding. In this context, applicants will need to present a detailed budget at application stage. So they will be detailing the costs of both the coordinator and the eligible partners. And we will be assessing this estimated budget, first of all, and then we will be applying a 50% co-financing rate. And by applying this 50% co-financing rate, the amounts will become, again, lump sums. So instead of having one fixed lump sum per type of project in slate and mini slate, in co-development, the lump sum will be customized to the needs of the project. Again, it's an output-based lump sum, which means that at the end, in case you are selected, you sign your contract, you implement your project. At the end of the implementation period, you will present us the deliverables that we agreed upon when signing your contract, and you will be getting the lump sum. So there will be no detailed financial reporting at the end of the funding period. Important to keep in mind in the context of this co-development. So as it's a multi-beneficiary grant agreement, both the coordinator and the partners can incur eligible costs and hence also receive part of the EU grant. So slate and mini slate is funding to one applicant company. Here in co-development, all the companies actively involved in co-developing the project can get part of the EU grant. There is a limitation though, so for the majority of the projects, the EU grant will be capped at €60,000 per applicant. So in case you submit as an application with two companies involved, the maximum EU grant will be €120,000, depending obviously on the eligible costs and then applying the 50% co-financing rate. For TV series with an intended production budget of 20 million or above, we can even go to €100,000 per applicant. So quite some money to be involved in this scheme, but it's quite new, really, with this focus on cooperation at a very early stage, dealing with the creative aspects of the project. So a bit different. In terms of deadline, so for co-development, the deadline will also be in September, like for mini slate, and there is a budget of €6 million. I just want to go back to the organizers because I have the impression that my time has already run out. So maybe we should open up for questions. My presentation is not done, but I think we can stop here and open up for questions rather than me continuing.
let's go back to a chat. Yes.
I see in the chat there was a question about the age to the definition of emerging talent. There is no age limitation, no. So emerging talent really has to do with the experience of the director. So it's the director that has not directed yet a work that would be eligible for SLATE funding support, but it can be somebody of 55 years or 60 years or 23, for example. So it's really about their background, their experience in terms of directing. It can be. Go ahead, David.
I would add that it doesn't matter if this emerging talent has already directed 3, 4, 5, 6 short films, because short films are not eligible for our SLATE funding support. So it doesn't matter the number of short film of non-commercial works the director, the talent may have directed, it does not matter.
Mm-hmm. And then a remark from the desk on SLATE results. Yes, indeed, results for SLATE for last year. Well, we are working on them. I hope that we will be able to notify applicants by beginning of March. Indeed, that will be, let's say, a very short time frame before the new deadline in April. But voilà, this is all the result from the fact that that last year the new program was adopted quite late. So we need to establish, let's say, a more regular deadline pattern than last year. There is nothing much we can do.
I see questions about co-development now. Can there be a third non-European partner?
You want to take it, David?
Well, just to say that there can be another partner involved, but it won't be a beneficiary of a grant. It cannot apply as a partner or coordinator. So there might be a producer from outside Europe involved in the project, but in any case, it will not be applicant and beneficiary of a media support.
No, indeed. But obviously it would be interesting. I mean, the international aspect of the project is important, but in the end it remains European development support. So we are supporting the European audiovisual production companies. So if that partner is there, if we have a co-production contract with a non-European partner as a third partner involved, all fine, but they will not be able to bring eligible costs nor get part of the EU grant.
We have a more or less similar question. Hello from South Africa. Can a project with 1 or 2 European producers that also involves a non-EU producer qualify for development support? That's what Yulin just explained.
Yes. So, yes, possible to be present in the application, but not as a beneficiary. So the South African production company will not be able to get part of the EU grant, unfortunately. There might be other avenues there. And I particularly like the comment from Tobias. I think you really get the heart of this co-development scheme. So an excellent way of combining a busy production company and a company that is focusing on creation, but that does not meet the requirements in terms of previous experience. This is indeed one of the core ideas behind this co-development scheme, is also to support cooperation between more established companies and maybe younger companies, and really feed from each other's strengths. So supporting maybe younger companies that are very innovative but do not have the necessary track record to apply for our funding. So great to see that that you caught on to that. Super. Any other questions?
It was too complete.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, obviously in half an hour, well, that was more or less the speaking time that I was that I was given. It's very difficult to go into the details. What I want to highlight is that there's somebody talking in the background. That in the run-up to the, well, we are currently publishing all the new calls, and we will be organizing information sessions where we really go into how to prepare an application in detail, really detailing all the eligibility criteria, what you should watch out for, how are we evaluating, what are important elements in preparing your application package, what are the common mistakes that we saw in last year's applications. The dates for these info sessions, we are establishing them now, but I would really invite you, if you are interested, to follow, on the one hand, the communications from your Creative Europe desks. So they will be communicating about these information sessions, but you can also find information on these sessions as soon as it becomes available on the call page. So keep that in mind.
I see two more questions. How can we get the slide, check the slide deck?
Slides. Yeah. I don't know whether that is foreseen. Obviously, if you leave us your email or you write to us, I'm happy to share. See a question from Cecilia. What about two companies in same country? So to fulfill the eligibility conditions, there must be minimum 2 European independent production companies established in 2 different media countries. But it's possible to have an application with 3 companies, where, for example, the coordinator is from Spain, one of the partners is from Spain, and the third one is, for example, from Croatia. And all the European companies are eligible for part of the EU grant. So theoretically, in case an application is submitted by 3 companies, you could ask for an EU grant of 60,000 euros per company, so up to 180,000 euros. Obviously, if it represents maximum 50% of the eligible costs. So it also would mean a very high development budget for this project.
Another question, can you please give a good example of a busy production company working with a young, new creative production company?
Well, we cannot, let's say we cannot divulge information about companies that apply for funding.
There's another question about the content of the application, about the artistic material. Should, for example, the script be ready? At what stage can the project be submitted? So basically, yes, this is part of the award criteria. We also assess the potential, the quality of a project. So a minimum would be requested, and you will find in the application document what we expect, depending on the category of project, animation, fiction, documentary, what we expect as artistic material. Doesn't have to be very heavy, but for instance, if you submit an application for a fiction project, it's good if you have already a first version of a script and you can send an excerpt within the application.
Yeah.
Yulin?
Yeah, otherwise, I mean, a detailed treatment,
Yes.
an intention note of the director. So if you are not at script stage yet, I mean, provide us sufficient elements in order to be able to assess the quality of the project.
Mm.
So then I would really think that that the detailed treatment and an intention note of director and producer are really necessary.
And regarding slate and mini slate, the amounts granted we mentioned are per project and not per slate, right?
Indeed. Right. So if you imagine, so let's say that the fixed lump sum for an animation one-off is 55,000 euros. So if you would present a slate of 3 animation projects, 3 one-offs, it would be 3 times 55,000 euros, and then if you sum that up, that will be the total EU grant requested. So it's really per project in the slate, and the EU grant requested is the sum of the individual fixed lump sums that apply to the projects.
And another question about the evaluation process. How long does it take before I have a notification of selection or rejection of my application?
Yeah, on average 6 months. We know that for certain other schemes, the selection period is shorter, but in let's say that in the context of the development support, as we are getting lots of applications, we have to calculate on average with 6 months. We try to do as fast as possible, but voilà, that's usually our finding is this 6 months.
I don't see other questions. I think we can say goodbye and close the session. If no more questions, no, I do not see anything. Okay.
In any case, yeah, the email address, I will maybe provide the email address of one of the functional mailboxes so that I don't get bombarded. Just take that, copy mail, and then I have to find you back. So in the chat, it is one of the functional mailboxes. So if you want the slides of this session, don't hesitate. But I would really invite you to watch out for these detailed information sessions which we will be organizing per action quite soon. So we will try to announce them in the upcoming days. So watch out for these dates, either in the newsmail from the Creative Europe desks or on the calls web pages. Voilà. David.
Thank you for attending this session, and we'll hear from you soon, I guess.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon.